Hi and welcome to Last Watch. If you're a regular to the channel, then you may have already noticed that I'm not in my usual setting. I've been trying to do this video for a week, but work keeps getting in the way. I'm in the office and I have the gear here with me, so I thought I'd crack on and do it while I have a bit of spare time. If you're looking at the watch, you may recognise it from the unboxing a couple of weeks ago where I got rather gushy and talked way too much and probably made my longest video yet. Hopefully this review, and it is a review today, will not take that long. We are of course looking at the Saab 065, otherwise known as the Cocktail Time. The history of this watch goes back some 8 years. It was developed in collaboration with a well-known Japanese bartender, i.e. cocktail waiter. He goes by the name of Shinobi Ishigaki. Now, something I found out whilst looking into this watch is that the Cocktail Time was a name given to 3 watches that were designed by Shinobi. This being the cool version of that watch. The other 2 watches, there was a sweet and a dry. The dry watch came with Roman numerals at the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock position, and the sweet came with Arabic indices at the 12, 3, 6 and 9. Both those watches were not that attractive and they soon died a very quick death, but the cool watch, the one that we now know as the Cocktail Time, lives on, or at least it did live on until March of 2017 when they mothballed it. In its place, they brought out a whole range of new watches, all under the cocktail guise and relabeled as Presage watches. Those watches are the SRPB models. The new variation of the cool or the well-known Cocktail Time was relabeled the SRPB 43J. I think the proper name for it was Skydiving. They also introduced 3 new models: the Margarita, the Manhattan and the Blue Moon. So the first thing we'll do before we get into this watch today is to discuss the thing that on the whole everybody hates about this watch, and it's not the watch at all, it's the strap. As you can see, the strap is a patent black, very shiny glossy leather with some blue stitching. It does have a deploying clasp, and it's the real letdown of the watch. It's the only letdown of this watch. If you were to pick one thing that would turn most people off this watch, it is the strap. However, that is easily fixed because the Saab 065, the cocktail, the cool cocktail, is a bit of a strap monster, and you can put it on just about any piece of leather you like, as long as it's not this one. And you can also put it on a bracelet. It goes particularly well with a mesh, from what I can see. So there's been loads of discussion about this strap and the deployant clasp. On the whole, everybody thinks it's installed upside down. I think the problem is that the deployant works ordinarily like a bracelet. The tail sticks out, and that's what makes it a bit awkward to wear. It feels back to front. The first thing you should do if you buy a Cocktail Time is ditch the strap. Hence, that is why I ditched the strap and I put it on what I think is a rather fetching strap from Hirsch. This is the blue Hirsch jumper. I was inspired by a fellow member of the Urban Gentry Facebook channel to buy this strap, and it is perfect on this watch. It ties in very nicely. The blue of the leather matches the blue of the second hand on the watch. It's very soft and comfortable. It still needs breaking in a little bit. It's got a bit of padding in there. I'm sure as it softens up, it will become much more comfortable on my wrist. But it is unquestionably much better than the strap that comes with this watch. Another thing I liked about this strap is the white stitching, which I think ties into the dial of the watch. And also the fact that the buckle is polished, as is the case of the watch. Alright, first things first, this is a white dial. Don't believe anything you see, don't believe anything you hear. It is a white dialed watch. Some people say that this is a blue dial. It is not. It is a white dial. The fact is, the dial of this watch catches light in so many different ways that, as you see, it appears blue, it appears white, it changes as you move it. But it is a white dialed watch. I know some people say that this is a blue dialed watch. It is not. If you want a blue variation of this watch. There is one available under the new Presage line, the new cocktail line. That is the Blue Moon, which is a very attractive watch, but it is not the white dialed cocktail time. So this is a completely new experience for me. Up until now, every watch in my collection has been a dive watch. This is my first dress watch. I took some time looking for a dress watch. I wanted one with a white dial, and I don't think I could have picked a better watch, especially for the price. But before we get into the dial of this watch, let's discuss the case. And there are a few things that I can leave out. For starters, there is no rotating bezel. It has a fixed bezel, very highly polished fixed bezel. There are no crown guards. There is no screw down crown. This is a pull-out crown. It's not waterproof down to 200 meters. You certainly couldn't go diving with this watch. This watch is waterproof to 50 meters. I might wash my hands wearing this watch, but I won't even wear it if I'm doing the dishes. I just wouldn't take that risk. And why would I? It's a dress watch. Why should I be wearing this watch while I'm doing the dishes, or washing the car for that matter? Getting back to the watch, why don't we throw to the specifications? So I'll just chuck in the measurements here. We have a width of 40 millimeters, and we have a lug width of 20 millimeters, a lug length of 47 millimeters, and we have a thickness of just over 13 millimeters, and a width at the deploying end of the strap of 18 millimeters. The weight on the original strap is 81.4 grams. So obviously the second bugbear about this watch has to be its thickness. Ideally, I would love it if this watch was 2-3 millimeters thinner. It would sit much nicer on the wrist. But don't get me wrong, it wears perfectly on my 7-inch wrist. I don't have any complaints about the sizing. I certainly don't have any complaints about the diameter. I think 39-40 millimeters is a sweet spot for my wrist. But the thickness, in all honesty, I have dive watches that are thinner than this watch. But getting back to the case, it's polished. It's just polished everywhere. There's no variation, there's no contrast, there is no brushing. It is just highly polished on every facet and every angle of this watch. I guess the only problem with that is that it may pick up scratches quite easily. But it's a dress watch. You're not going to wear this to do work on the car or the garden. You might decide to make it your all-day wear if you work in an office, and you'd probably be very gingerly about doing anything heavy in the office. But yeah, this is a dress watch, so it can get away with being highly polished. Things to note about the case: we have a crown, a signed crown at the 3 o'clock position. Has the Seiko S, the Super S. The crown pops out. If you notice, it is hacking. The second hand stops there. It's easy to move. If I just move this on, one thing I did notice, if I move this on to midnight, let's hope it doesn't let me down. But it snaps quite quickly at the midnight position. There you go. Just before the midnight, snaps on the date change very, very quickly. I understand that some watches can take a couple of hours to change from one day to another, but the Seiko Saab 065 Cool Cocktail is not one of those. It was very, very quick to change. As this is a pull-out crown, you will notice on the back there's a little cutout on the case for you to get a fingernail into. Makes it somewhat easier to pop that crown. So the only other bugbear, and it's not even a bugbear, but the thing that you notice with this watch, especially after having a collection of divers, is that the crown is quite petite, and what that does is it kind of emphasizes the fact that this is a dress watch. It's quite delicate. You have to be quite delicate to wind it, or at least that's what you feel until you wind it. And then you realize that this watch is very well put together. You can feel it. You can feel it winding. There's a nice bit of resistance there. And it's part of the pleasure of having this watch. It means that you have to be a little bit intimate with it. But given that it is an automatic watch, if you're going to wear this watch daily, there is no need to wind it. I would add that if you wanted a bigger crown, then I suppose you could mod the watch, but the SRPB, one thing that they did, I don't know if you would say it's an improvement, but it does have a bigger crown. I did hear though that that big crown in itself is a bit of annoyance because it tends to stick into the wrist. This is a dress watch. I think to have a smaller crown is preferable. This watch is a JDM model. Ultimately, what that means is that the watch was never destined to be sold overseas. It was always meant for the Japan domestic market. Hence the warranty here, if you notice, which says this guarantee is only valid in Japan. But when it comes down to it, watch collectors are good at spotting bargains and good at spotting quality. This watch was picked up by collectors and they started purchasing it from outside of Japan, and that sparked even more of an interest in it, and its notoriety grew and grew. But that does explain why when you buy this watch it will come with the warranty, which again, as I've just mentioned, the guarantee is only valid in Japan. So if you can buy this from a legitimate seller, which I doubt you'll be able to do now because the only place I've seen these for sale is on eBay. So this is the warranty you will get with it. But that also explains something that threw me when this turned up, was the fact that there was an Amazon address and it said Seattle, and it was only afterwards. Obviously this watch at some point was destined to be sold on Amazon in Japan. Japan has its own Amazon website, but ultimately it is a part of the American company. Moving on to the back of the watch, we have a screw down display case back, which allows you to see the movement inside. The movement inside is one of Seiko's better ones, especially for a budget watch. It's the 6R15C. It's not the prettiest of things, but at the same time, it's a marvel to look at, to be able to see the inside of your watch, to see its heart beating quite literally. You'll notice that the rotor of the dial is signed also, and it has a slight guilloche effect to it, just to add a little bit of decoration. But apart from that, and possibly being able to see the odd jewel inside, it's not a beautiful movement as such, but it's still intriguing to watch it. So the 6R15 movement is a 23 jewel movement. It beats at 21,600 beats an hour, and it has a 50-hour power reserve, quite considerable again for a dress watch. And I'll mention those in a minute when I compare it to the watches that have since replaced this watch. So coming back to the front of the watch and looking at the dial, actually before we moved on to the dial, let's yet again discuss its thickness. That thickness is not helped by the Hardlex Boxdome crystal on the front of the watch, but at the same time it's that Boxdome crystal that gives this watch its character. So would you prefer a flat crystal on this watch and lose that character, or do you put up with it? It adds what, another 1.52 millimeters to the watch. I think if they're going to take depth out of the watch or thickness out of this watch, they could easily take it out of the case, which they did do with the successor to this watch. So we get into the dial of the watch. This watch is famous for its dial. It's the talk of the internet. It's the talk of all dress watches. It is a beautiful starburst dial. It radiates from the center of the watch right to the very edge. There are some variations of this where it's broken up or it doesn't quite go to the edge, but I'm not here to discuss those watches. We're here to look at the original cocktail time. The handset, we have Dauphine style hands. They are chrome, but depending on how they catch the light, they can look black, they can look blue, but they are chrome. But the standout of the handset has to be the blue sewing needle styled second hand, which is one of the things that drew me to this watch. On the face of the watch, we have an applied Seiko logo just under the 12 o'clock position. And again, we have a script just above the 6 o'clock position, which says automatic 23 joules. Looking at that, I'm unsure. You would think that it's printed, but it actually looks like it has been applied. So maybe it's something to do with the printing process and how they managed to adhere it to this very, very special radiant dial. I shouldn't imagine it would be very easy just to print normally onto this dial. Also on the dial, we have applied indices. They are what I would best describe as being fluted in a very kind of neo 1930s American style, modern art, kind of deco style. The markers at the 12, the 6 and the 9 are a single piece, whereas the other markers, not including the 3 o'clock position, the 3 o'clock position has been broken up by the date window. All the other markers, apart from the 12, the 6 and the 9, are broken into segments. I did read somewhere that the applied indices are meant to represent a cocktail glass. That might very well be so. Unless you're James Bond of the 1970s, and I believe the cocktail glasses had a slightly different shape then. Yes, definitely a fluted style cocktail glass shape, which I guess harks back to the collaboration with Shinobi, the designer of this watch. At the 3 o'clock position, we have a date window which is framed quite nicely with a chrome border. I should add that on close inspection under a macro, if you look at the applied indices on this, these fluted indices, the markers definitely have a warm tone to them. I am sorry to say that I found a couple of quality control issues with it. There is something on the 5 o'clock marker. I don't know if it's a bit of fluff inside the watch or a piece of glue or a very small hair. It's very hard to pick out. I actually only noticed it once I got a loop onto the watch to have a good look at it. I don't know if it's worth taking this watch apart to try and get at it. Given that I didn't notice it until I got a macro on it, I think I can live with it. But also earlier today, I noticed what looked like a hair, possibly an eyelash, under the date window. And when I turned the date window to advance it, it disappeared. So I suspect that there might be an eyelash or something similar, maybe a piece of thread or something on the inside of this watch. I can only hope that it doesn't do any damage to the interior of the watch. By far the best thing of this watch is the dial. It is glorious to behold. It's a beautiful watch. It catches the light no matter where you are. I can really see why you would wear this on an evening out. If you were to wear this on a bright sunny day outside, you might be arrested for carrying a weapon of mass distraction, because this thing is phenomenal in light. I would love to know the manufacturing process for this watch, to see how they make this dial, to see what it is that they put into these radials that spin out from the centre to the edges. One thing I did notice with this watch is that the second markers are broken down into 6 increments. A reference to the movement inside this watch, which beats 6 times per second. So I was very, very lucky with this watch. I purchased it through eBay, but it wasn't an impulsive buy. I've been watching this watch since the beginning of the year. There are a couple of sellers based out of Ireland that sell on eBay. They constantly have these in stock, although they do have a warning that there is limited stock. I considered buying it very many times. It wasn't that expensive. It's one of the cheapest watches I bought so far, but they had it on at £329, but I held off. I was still looking at other options for a white dialed watch, and then over the Easter period there was a discount available on certain areas of eBay. I used that discount to buy this watch, and I got this watch for £263. Now, the other options that I was looking at with regards to getting a white dialed watch were the Hamilton Khaki Kings and also a Tissot, and both of those watches coming in just under £500 upwards. I consider that I got a bargain. Hence my last video where I unboxed this and asked the question, did I buy a fake Seiko? Obviously I didn't. I got myself a real bargain. The question is, this watch was discontinued more than a year ago. It is still available, and it's still available at a reasonable price. Funnily enough, the replacement of this watch, the SRPB 43J, is available for pretty much the same price. So given that you can buy the original Cool Cocktail or its replacement for the same price, which one would you choose? Now, there are twos and throws either way. First of all, this watch is much more accurate than its replacement, and it has a better power reserve. But ultimately, it is a dress watch, so you're only going to wear it on certain occasions. Unless, of course, you make it your daily wear in an office environment, then being more precise and having a better power reserve may be of something that's of interest to you if you intend to leave this over the weekend and then put it back on for the Monday morning. I went for this watch because it does have a superior movement to the watch that replaced it. Ultimately, the big question is, why did Seiko kill this watch off only to replace it within the year with a watch that looks remarkably similar to it? Apart from a few key changes on the dial and a slightly bigger crown, there are very, very few differences between this watch. Well, I think it all comes down to cost. The movement in the original Cocktail is the 6R15, whereas the movement in the replacement watch is the 4R35. That is a slightly inferior movement. It's not as accurate, and it doesn't have a big power reserve like this watch. This watch is supposed to be accurate within plus 25 and minus 15 seconds per day. I am averaging plus 7 seconds per day. If you're in the market for a white dial version of the Cocktail Time watch, then you'd be a fool not to buy the Saab 065. The SRPB 43J may be a worthy replacement for it with a lesser movement. Given that they are the same price, then, buy the superior watch. However, if you want this watch in a different flavour, shall we say, then by all means look at the SRPB replacements. The new Blue Moon, which actually does have a blue dial, is a very attractive watch, and even though it has a lesser movement, it is something that I might consider purchasing in the future. These are dress watches, so unless you're working in an office situation, which I don't, you're not going to wear these watches every day. I bought this watch for a particular reason. I'm going to a wedding in a few months' time, and this will be the watch, unless something else comes along, this will be the watch that I wear on that day. And here is the cool Cocktail Time sitting on my 7-inch wrist. As you can see, it fits and wears very well. Yes, it would be nice if it was slightly thinner, but I can live with that. It doesn't have a chunky rotating bezel on the top of this watch. I think it will fit quite nicely under a cuff. The Bluehurst jumper complements it beautifully. The polished buckle and tang tie in very nicely with the very polished body of the case of the watch. So there we have it, my review of the Saab 065. Make of it what you will. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. Better still, if you could subscribe to the channel, that would be excellent. Again, I would like to thank everybody that has subscribed to the channel and the amount of people that have been watching my videos. What I'm hoping for is that I'm in a position of power at some point in the future so that I can contact some watchmakers, some manufacturers, and possibly get them to provide me with reference copies of watches so that I can review for you guys and help you with any future purchases. So thank you very much. Catch you on the next one.